It's like, how did Israel got attacked on October 7th by absolute barbarians, unambiguously so. I mean, the moral high ground could not be more clear. The very people who were raped and killed and tortured and kidnapped were the peaceniks in Israel, right? Not the, not the ultra-Orthodox religious maniacs on the Jewish side or the settlers or anything. I mean, just the very people who are, you would think would do the most PR damage to the Hamas side of the story, and yet magically, they've managed to weaponize the information landscape in such a way that, I mean, wherever it wasn't already destroyed by the ambient level of anti-Semitism that exists in the world, Israel's reputation has been completely destroyed over the war in Gaza, just by having lost an information war.
They also haven't helped themselves, Sam.
No, they haven't even tried.
No, they haven't. Yeah. Number one. And number two, you have people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir who've been in the cabinet going around and saying things that are quite frankly just beyond the pale as well.
But there's just two of them.
Yeah.
There's only two anyone can name.
Yeah.
And but that when you hold that up against the reality of religious fanaticism on the other side, it's just, we're not talking about
I'm glad
similar
we're moving onto that issue, because you mentioned earlier that you don't think the ceasefire is likely to lead to peace in the Middle East. Why?
I just think it's too deep a problem. I mean, I think one, Hamas is, agreeing to a ceasefire insofar as they are. I mean, now they're killing their fellow Palestinians, and strangely, there's not much complaint about that coming from Hollywood or any of the ceasefire people, left of center, who ostensibly are worried about Palestinians. But they would agree to a ceasefire so as to regroup, to live, to fight another day, right? I mean, these are not people who are going to be happily shopping in whatever mall that the Kushners and the Trumps and the Witkoffs build in Gaza City in a few short years, should all this work out. No, I mean, they're a death cult, right? They're real jihadists who really want things. They're not transactional. They're not secretly hoping to just be wealthy or just be, I mean, I'm sure there's some peripheral cynical people who might be like that, but the true believers are true believers, and they're in a religious war, not just with Israel, but with everyone who's not Muslim, right?
And even Muslims as well.
Even Muslims who they consider to be apostates. And so when viewed from, this whole peace process is not credible from the point of view of real jihadists, right? It's like the people who are representing the other Arab interests. The crown prince of wherever is just another apostate who would be condemned by Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State or Al-Shabaab or any of the other organizations, including Hamas. I'm not saying all jihadists are the same, but they're the same in this regard, and they really are committed to a longer-term project of winning a religious war.
But that's why the original Trump plan, it imposed dismantlement and disarmament of Hamas as part of its terms. Now, that hasn't transpired, but basically everyone in the region other than Iran and Hamas agrees that Hamas cannot be allowed to remain in power in Gaza. So the question is, can you get beyond that? And if you listen to our discussion with Joe, I made this point, which was about the Kushner plan, as I understand it, is to try and get the moderate Arabs to work with Israel in opposition to Iran. You have to get rid of Hamas for that to happen. And then you get them all trading together, and then they hold hands and sing Kumbaya.
Yeah, but again, you're talking about the wealthy monarchs of the region who have the so-called Arab street to worry about. And the Arab street in all the scores of countries. I mean, there's 50 plus Muslim majority countries, not all Arab, is highly radicalized. It's not as radicalized as the Palestinians. I mean, the Palestinians Hamas is still popular among the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank. I think it's true to say that they would win an election in the West Bank today.
Also, as well, Sam, we need to take into account that the first thing that they did when Israel stopped bombing Gaza was it then went out and shot people it regarded as traitors, kneecapped them, tortured them, all the rest of them.
You can't be certain that the opinion polls reflect people's genuine
but you
sentiment.
can be certain of the level of religious fanaticism in the area.
Yeah.
What people care about, they care about, above all, like the top of the list would be any desecration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. There's no number of kids you can kill that matters more than that. And that's bizarre. That's insane. That's the morally upside down to have a culture that is framing their core moral concerns around religious fiction, right? There are many cultures like that, but Islamic culture is the world over has the worst version of that. Right. Again, like you and I could say the three of us could say something on this podcast sufficiently provocative or do something like burn a Quran that could literally cause embassies to burn tomorrow in a dozen countries. It's like that's the world we're living in. The Muslim community the world over is uniquely combustible based on the significance of religious symbols. And they're not uniquely combustible. They don't. We've seen protest after protest over things like cartoons and the naming of a teddy bear. We have not seen protests, certainly not sizable ones, over what an outrage it is that groups like Hamas or Hezbollah or Al-Shabaab or Al-Qaeda or Lashkar-e-Taiba or Boko Haram or any of these jihadist and Islamist groups over the fact that they have committed atrocities against now practically countless innocent people, most of whom are Muslim, right? Like how can you not have 100,000 people turning up in the streets of London to protest the Islamic State at its height? Where were those protests? Where were all the Muslims who were desperate to disavow jihadism in the face of the Islamic State? What you had people dropping out of medical school in London, people dropping out of the London School of Economics to go join the Islamic State to take Yazidi women as sex slaves and then bragging about it on Twitter, right? And where were the protests? No, the protests were over the Danish cartoons, right?
What's your point, Sam?
What the center of gravity for far too much of this community of 2 billion people in the world over, is around religious pride and humiliation, religious symbolism. It's not around the real consequential body count of violence and peacemaking, right? It's not about most of the world, and certainly most of the Muslim world doesn't care when Muslims kill other Muslims. They care when Jews do it. Most of the world doesn't care when Muslims kill Christians, right? It's strange. This is something I'm genuinely surprised about and confused about. I'm not quite sure why fundamentalist Christians aren't more agitated around the murder of Christians in sub-Saharan Africa by Muslims. Right now, the Islamic State is cutting the heads off of Christians in
it's Nigeria.
Nigeria and maybe also Uganda, but it's definitely Nigeria. It's like you would think that would be a pretty big deal. It's not. It's no. It's the most inflammatory thing on earth is Jews killing Muslims in the Holy Land. So we need I mean, yes, we desperately need a war of ideas, if not an actual civil war within the Muslim world in scores of countries to nullify the cancer of jihadism. I mean, Islam plus jihadism is going to prove totally unworkable for open societies everywhere in the future. There's no way of assimilating jihadists. It's not. I mean, what you're experiencing in the UK right now is what it's like to have 6% of your society be Muslim, and some percentage of those Muslims to want to live under Sharia law, and some percentage of those Muslims to happily create, so-called grooming gangs because it's in line with their view of how you think about infidel young girls. And you're trying to absorb all that, and you got Tommy Robinson out there complaining. The Muslim community has to figure out how to purge itself of this level of religious fanaticism and these specific commitments around things like punishing apostasy and blasphemy and I, in the fullness of time, maybe they'll do that. Under pressure, maybe they'll do that, but they're not tending to do it organically.
Well, this is where Saudi and the UAE are interesting, right? Because they are trying to do this. They're trying to replace Islamism with a more moderate version plus economic growth. Yeah. So the young men in particular have things to do and a purpose in life and a family to feed and all this other stuff, and are not drawn towards these sorts of ideologies. Well, you seem skeptical about that.
Yeah, because I think these religious commitments are sincere for many, many millions of people. And also, it's just for everyone. I mean, wealth is not enough on some level. I mean, this is many people think they need religion. I mean, you're certainly aware of this, and you're talking about this more. And I mean, you and I view this differently. I think the burden is on us to understand that the real depths of human flourishing need to be talked about in ways that are non-sectarian. I mean, the truth is non-sectarian. The truth is not Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or Jewish. So that's true of physics, and it's also true of the mind, right? Whatever's possible for us mentally and emotionally and socially, and whatever happens after death, and it's like to believe otherwise is to believe that one isolated community 2,000 years ago that had no access to science or even scientific values, much less scientific tools, got it perfectly right, and everyone else got it wrong, right? So one of these revealed texts is true, despite the fact that none of them seem to recognize that slavery was a problem morally, among other things. They know nothing about DNA or electricity or information science or the real scale of the cosmos or how disease spreads or anything, but they can tell you how to sacrifice a goat. And they've got some good wisdom in there too, but they don't have a monopoly on that because, the Greeks had that and the Buddhists had that. And, the golden rule exists in many different contexts. And, even monkeys seem to intuit some basic version of it. When you treat them unfairly or, reward one with a cucumber and another with a grape, they tend to not like that. Whatever's true about us spiritually and ethically is deeper than culture, and it's certainly deeper than any ancient culture, right? And the fact that the world was partitioned by language barriers and geographical barriers for thousands of years, and everyone came up with different books, is an artifact that we have to recognize as an artifact. It's specious, it's spurious. It's not the actual foundation of our moral knowledge or anything else. And when you go into the Bible and read it and purport to find wisdom there, even if you're a fundamentalist, fundamentalists are picking and choosing the stuff they think is wise and the stuff they think is better left ignored. And And they're doing that on the basis of a larger cultural conversation that is secular and that has moved on. So it's like the fact that you're still not trying to figure out whether you should kill somebody for working on the Sabbath if you're Jewish and reading the Pentateuch, or whether you really need to hunt witches in your community for the crime of witchcraft, right? But the fact that you can ignore all that and just take the so-called good stuff, again, that's an editing procedure that is the gold standard of that is your own moral intuitions that have been tuned up by your engagement with the 21st century, your inevitable engagement with the 21st century and a wider secular culture, right? So none of these religions have a monopoly on anything other than their own sectarian ignorance and tribalism and dogmatism. And all of that is best disavowed, and we can have a real conversation about what is truly transcultural and deeper than the artifacts of whatever grandma had in her bag before we knew anything about biology or the human brain or etc. But most of the world doesn't see it that way. Most of the world is mightily attached to whatever they got at mother's knee about the unique sanctity of a specific book and what happens after death. And they've organized their lives around it. And in the case of Islam, you're talking about a much wider culture that has been insulated from modernity to a remarkable degree and has not had the same kinds of collisions with rationality or science or secular politics. And so on some level, it's like we're dealing with the Christians of the 14th century in many, many places, and even on the streets of London.